Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dee Lageson, Executive Secretary for the Committee on the Present Danger China. We appreciate your interest in our weekly webinars in which we expose and analyze the Chinese Communist Party's unrestricted warfare against America and the free world, and the help being provided to the CCP in waging that warfare by captured U.S. elites. We encourage you to visit presentdangerchina.org for information on new programs, access to videos of our past webinars, and tons of other very valuable content. Please subscribe to our Substack at presentdangerchina.substack.com and follow us on X at CPD China. Also, we are co-hosting with the Sovereignty Coalition, sovereigntycoalition.org, at Sov Coalition on X. Our moderator today is Frank Gaffney. Frank is the president of the Institute for the American Future and vice chair for the Committee on the Present Danger China. He is co-founder of the Sovereignty Coalition and host of Securing America on Real America's Voice network.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you to all of you for joining us for this edition of our weekly webinar series discussing the threat we face from the Chinese Communist Party, its unrestricted warfare against our country, and the extent to which we are addressing that threat appropriately. We are coming to you at a moment when it seems each passing day is raising the visibility of an activity that has been going on in the big tech world now for some years, largely unbeknownst to most Americans. It has been going on in national laboratories. It has been going on in the various emporia, if you will, of the tech industry here, and it has been going on aggressively in communist China as well. The extent to which what is happening in China is substantially a product of what is being purloined or otherwise acquired from what is going on here in the way of artificial intelligence is a topic to which we will turn momentarily. But the bottom line is this, that artificial intelligence is now a thing. It's not just some of the sort of garden variety initial generation products like ChatGPT, which many of us are familiar with and have actually been utilizing. There are now other entrants in the race to be the dominant AI power in the world for commercial, yes, but also national security reasons. And we've had, in the course of just the past week or so, announcements by President Trump shortly after his inauguration that huge new investments were going to be made in AI infrastructure in our country. We also had an announcement by the Chinese earlier this week that they were rolling out something they call DeepSeek as a free large language model app, platform, whatever you want to call it, technology that could be used on individuals' own relatively modest computers and be made available with somewhat heightened capability, I guess, to the Chinese if people would use the app for DeepSeek, all of which have very profound implications for both the individuals in question, their personal information and proprietary assets online, as well as the nation as a whole. In other words, this webinar could not come, I think, at a more timely moment for us to get calibrated on the brave new world we're entering and the implications for us, not only in terms of how intelligent we are, but also how we may find ourselves controlled, certainly surveilled, if not actually enslaved by those who are bringing us this technology, particularly the more advanced forms of artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and artificial, I can't remember what the other one is, but it's even more super duper than your garden variety general artificial intelligence. Fortunately, we're going to hear more about all of this from one of the people who has become, I think, a preeminent figure in helping us understand what this all involves and the kind of flip side of the artificial intelligence coin. That would be the transhumanist agenda being advanced by some of the same people who are promoting artificial intelligence. I think artificial superintelligence was the word I was looking for. The individual I'm speaking of who will lead off our discussion is Joe Allen. He is the author of an important book entitled Dark Aeon, if I'm pronouncing it the way he does, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity, is its subtitle. He is the transhumanism editor for our friend Steve Bannon's War Room Pandemic program. And I couldn't be more pleased to have him with us to help sort of level set for us. What is happening in this space? What does it mean for all of us? And Joe, thank you for taking the time to do that.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you to the audience. This is definitely a complicated subject, and it's difficult to wrap your head around it in a 10-minute segment. But the first thing that I should try to drive home is that of the three players that we are talking about, the three camps that we're going to talk about, big tech, so-called little tech, and international competitors, especially China, is that all three of these camps want to sell you artificial intelligence. They want to sell you on the idea of artificial intelligence. With some exceptions, most of them would like to see large language models and other AIs integrated into education, into corporate structure, into government agencies, into medicine, and as the stakes get higher, into military systems. And they are doing so quite successfully. So those three camps, big tech, so-called little tech, or startups in the US, and we'll focus on just China. What we saw over the weekend with the release of DeepSeek's R1 large language model, or AI, both as an open source code and a free download, and also as an app, was, if you consider economic competition to be a critical form of warfare or conflict, a huge attack on US big tech. What they did quite successfully was undermine the narrative of necessity, the idea that companies like OpenAI, Nvidia, partners like Microsoft, big players like Google, that these companies were necessary for the advancement of artificial intelligence, and that they would be basically dominant forever. They would have kind of a cartel status. DeepSeek was, like I say, it's free. It was produced very efficiently. I think there's every reason to doubt the actual numbers that we're hearing, the number of processing units, graphic processing units used to produce the AI, also the amount of money and resources put into it. But even whatever the actual number is, it's clear that they were able to work off of OpenAI's model and create a very effective large language model, which basically means an AI that you're going to ask questions and it is going to tell you what is or isn't real. by undermining big tech. You saw it with the stock prices of Nvidia just plummeted. I think lost something like 17% in a day, something close to that. Something like $1 trillion in wealth overall, and the stock market just eradicated. Of course, it's bouncing back, but what it shows is how this warfare, this arms race between these different AI companies, how volatile it really is. Even if DeepSeek's R1 isn't superior to ChatGPT or even Meta's Llama, then it shows that there is a hunger for integrating artificial intelligence into people's lives, into their companies, into their education, into their agencies, their government agencies. And it also shows that even to be crass, kind of a cheap Chinese knockoff can completely upend the market. Now, I also want to emphasize that, my own view is that whatever use large language models or medical AIs or military robotics control based AIs, whatever use they may have, as far as the US population, it's going to be very important to understand that these pieces of software, these AI models, this artificial intelligence, however you want to think of it, that they have real power. They have the power to, for instance, compress human knowledge and create an interface through which people can ask, what is real? They have the power to control robotics to an amazing degree. They have the power to understand the inner workings of the brain and translate that directly, as we saw just today with Neuralink, into everything from robotics control to other forms of digital control with a direct brain interface. All of that is real. All of that has to be grappled with. But it's also important to understand that the hype coming ahead of it is always going to be far ahead of what the actual product is. And so as you're being sold on the idea, as we heard at the day two of Trump's administration, the announcement of Project Stargate, with Masayoshi-san saying that this will lead to artificial general intelligence, an intelligence that is as good as any human being at any cognitive task, basically a superhuman AI, moving on to artificial superintelligence, which is in essence a godlike intelligence. You have to hear these claims as what they are. These are advertisements. And just like with McDonald's, you see the burger in the picture and then you see what comes in the box. It's always going to be a bit different. You're never going to get what is advertised. Coming back to this notion of the AI arms race, though, there are a couple of different elements or spheres in which it is going to be somewhat critical for the U.S. to stay ahead of China. The first and foremost is in the use of algorithms and artificial intelligence. We're just going to stick with that term, however fuzzy it may be. The use of algorithms and artificial intelligence for national security, for military purposes, for being able to take the vast amounts of data that is procured by different surveillance devices, from satellites to cameras to internet data scrapers, and to make sense of that data, to identify threats. This is being used in warfare now in Ukraine and in the Levant, in Israel and Palestine. This is being used in the kind of Cold War between the U.S. and its various geopolitical competitors. It will be important to stay ahead of that. It will also be important from a national security level to be ahead of other countries' weapons systems, unless we want to basically organize our own country at their behest. And I, as much as I hate to see this race, it is the reality. We have to stay ahead on those things. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that we then open up every other sector of our society to the influence of the companies who are pushing for militarized artificial intelligence technology, so that just because AI is critical for national security, that doesn't mean that AI is either necessary or even desirable as it's used to educate children, as it's used to indoctrinate the wider public. Remember that these models are always going to have biases and they're always going to have severe limitations. They oftentimes hallucinate. And so this notion that AI will make people smarter, if you're familiar with the notion of being Google brained, of people offloading their cognition to machines, you know that already the technology we have has led to human atrophy. And so there's no reason to think that artificial intelligence won't just accelerate that process. The same goes with medical technology. There are undoubted uses for artificial intelligence or advanced algorithms in medicine for diagnosis, for treatment, for surgery. But the more we offload that expertise, that medical expertise, onto machines, and the less we encourage human excellence, excellent doctors, excellent nurses, excellent hospital staff, then the more we set ourselves up to be basically one dead battery away from being morons. The same goes in companies, the same goes in government agencies. So it's going to be a very delicate balance. But in this arms race scenario, in which not only are US companies like big tech and so-called little tech, the startups, going to be at each other's throats trying to sell you, the public, on the advantages that their AI will provide, you're also going to have international competitors like DeepSeek, like Baidu, like ByteDance, like Tencent, and other AI companies from all over the globe that are going to be pushing the same narrative. And whatever your opinion on it is, it has direct economic consequences, and it has direct geopolitical consequences, not only in the real life scenarios of actual military conflict, but also just simply prestige and status. So for the listener, my closing statement is simply this: understand the power of what is called artificial intelligence, but always be skeptical of the degree of power that's being projected either by companies or by countries.
Joe, thank you very much. An outstanding sort of overview, an introduction to some of the main elements of this drama. And we'll look forward to having a chance to visit with you in Q&A about, well, hallucination, among other things. Sort of top of my mind. We're going to turn next, though, to another of our distinguished contributors to many of these webinars. His name is Gordon Chang. He has been at the very forefront of the community of people who are, I think, clued up about and warning against what the Chinese Communist Party has been up to, notably with respect to its unrestricted warfare against our country. The thrust of this particular webinar is that the AI battle space, artificial intelligence, is one of the ways, one of the domains in which that unrestricted warfare is being prosecuted. We're going to play a clip from an interview that I had this morning with Gordon for our television program, Securing America, in which he spoke about what the Chinese are up to, what their well, objectives are in terms of taking their assault on us far beyond what they have already perpetrated in the form of a relatively prosaic but still very dangerous platform in the social media space called TikTok. Let's go to the clip of the video from Securing America with Gordon G. Chang.
Gordon, I think you have taught me most of what I know about the folly of our engagement strategy with the Chinese Communist Party. This DeepSeek, I call it DeepSeek, it's actually DeepSeek, project is of a piece with some of the worst of those follies. What are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, my friends call it deep sneak. Really what we're talking about is a large language model that is, I think, run by the Communist Party. DeepSeek is a private company. It was formed in July 2023, and it's done something which is just too fantastical for words. It created the world's best AI, and we know that because it's open source, so there's very little doubt about that. But they said they did it in a very short time frame. After all, the company is less than 2 years old. Also, they're reporting that they did this for $6 million. Well, OpenAI has stated, and other people have confirmed, that what DeepSeek has done is actually steal OpenAI's ChatGPT, GPT-4 to be specific. And they did it by what's called distilling, which is to use one large language model to teach another. And that is a violation of the terms of service of OpenAI. So really, this is intellectual property theft, but it shows you what China is willing to do. What is important about this is because this is AI, it gathers so much information, more than TikTok, for instance, and because it's in communist China, they have put restraints on it, so it propagates the Communist Party's narrative. So, all sorts of answers come out of this that are inimical to freedom and to the United States. That is going to be a critical problem going forward. And by the way, it is the most downloaded app everywhere these days because it is free and it's basically the best on the market.
So what you've just described, Gordon, is, I guess, a Trojan horse being wheeled into this country and other nations around the world with the express purpose, obviously, of interacting with individual consumers. And it's in the nature of artificial intelligence that develops a certain intimacy of knowledge about those individuals, as well as an opportunity to insert ideas or information or, propaganda into the hands of people, the heads of people worldwide. What could possibly go wrong with all that?
What could possibly go wrong is that you have the Communist Party with the introduction of DeepSeek's R1 model, which was January 20, by the way, a date that we changed management in the United States. There's been a blitz of Communist Party propaganda over the futility of American sanctions. So the idea here is that DeepSeek's great, supposedly built around American sanctions, and so therefore trying to convince the United States to give up all of those measures that in fact restrict China's development of AI. So all of this is much too convenient for me. And I think that essentially, there are a number of things. It's possible that this was developed by a private company, but it's more likely that this was a long-term project of the Chinese central government or Communist Party that they just delivered to DeepSeek. I don't know that to be the case, but I think we should think about the possibility of that. But in any event, the Communist Party is using the introduction of the R1 model to really just go at the U.S. and try to get us to drop our defenses.
Mm-hmm. And one of those is, in addition to efforts to restrict software, and obviously distilling opportunities for the Chinese, we've made a push to try to prevent them from having access to advanced instruments that Nvidia has been producing now for some time. Your theory of the case that this is meant to suggest that those won't work either, and therefore they should be dispensed with?
Yeah, this, as I mentioned, it's a Communist Party blitz on this issue. And it was, I think, built around the introduction of DeepSeek's R1 model. Of course, I can't prove that. But the two things occurred at the same time. And in the Communist Party's very structured system, there are fewer coincidences in China than there are anywhere else.
This is yet another perspective on the Chinese piece of this, to further explore the U.S. side, and for that matter, sort of take stock on where the industry is headed more generally. I'm very pleased to reintroduce a member of our Committee on the Present Danger of China, who has been a contributor very actively offline, but also occasionally on these programs. Her name is Connie Elliott. She is a polymath, I believe is the technical term for it. I have found there to be very few subjects on which she does not have a lot of knowledge and a lot of informed opinions. So it's always a delight to be able to present her. In this case, for the purposes of talking about the weaponization of AI by the Chinese Communist Party and what we must do to defend ourselves against it, presumably by taking advantage of these same technologies. Connie, thank you for joining us and for whatever you can share on these topics and more.
Thanks for having me, Frank. What a big subject at what a moment in history. We're at a moment where we are unleashing tools on our world that are like the golem of legend. You know, they deliver human-like responses, and we're just beginning to explore how they're changing our world. The thing to know about all LLMs is that they are very, very fine pattern matchers. They can perceive very subtle differences in a pattern and kick that information back to their users so that these differences can be taken advantage of. The first place that I think we've seen really broad application of these technologies is in finance. BlackRock, for example, owns an AI called Aladdin. Aladdin services are rented out to major financial firms, hedge funds, institutional traders. Aladdin currently conducts something like 70% of all financial markets trades globally. Aladdin's users say that they cannot keep up with the pace of change in global financial markets without Aladdin's analysis and without being able to program Aladdin in order to rapidly take advantage of market conditions. When you have a program that conducts 70% of the trades, program is its own counterparty. So when you have markets like commodities markets, where one side bets yes and the other side bets no, in this case, you have one program betting against itself. We have not yet begun to explore what that means and if we actually have financial markets in the classic sense anymore. That's just one place. And I brought up the financial space first because Highflyer, the firm which created DeepSeek, is actually started as a quantitatively driven hedge fund. And they shifted all their research and said, we actually have to have an LLM of our own. We've got to spin our own LLM in order to be able to keep up with what's going on in the markets. That's just one. The other place we've seen large applications of AI that we understand is in social media. Social media curation algorithms are given our user data, they're given our content, they're given some other content. They're told to optimize for certain metrics like time spent engaged with the system by each user on average. They're told to optimize for clicks through. They have to because they get their revenue through an advertising model. This also has an effect on our emotional state. Why? Because what internet advertisers have learned over the past 30 years is that people will click through on rage. So they need to show you things to make you angry, and they will buy to relieve fear. So if any of us have ever engaged in retail therapy, you have engaged, and I've done it. So let's say we have engaged in the kinds of things that these AIs want to get us to do to optimize their revenue. It's not just buying decisions that can be affected. A selection can be made for a voting decision. So we're seeing some of this leak over into political advertising. We're being divided into camps based on rage. And in the aftermath of the 2020 election, the 2024 election, we see either exhausted people dropping out, or people saying, I don't want to be attractive to MAGA men. How can I be not attractive to MAGA men? Stay away from me. You know, these divisions within our society, they fit a Marxist playbook for optimizing on rifts and on fissures and exacerbate them, and LLMs filling our interaction space with divisive messages is a whole brand new frontier in the waging of political warfare. But really what we're talking about now is all these LLMs are dependent on math. And one of the ways that this math is being weaponized against us is that we have an AI labor shortage. Our security state has been threatened by the knowledge of math. For example, the math needed to build your own nuclear bomb is not especially complicated. If you can do multivariate calculus, you can do the math needed to make your own bomb. And as a result, we have made math education in our schools very difficult to get. The Chinese, on the other hand, have been spinning up mathematicians for the past 40 years. Fourth graders in Shanghai are doing the equivalent of university-level discrete math in many cases. So they have built an ocean of people who are uniquely prepared to solve these problems. And if you take a look at research papers on AI now, the majority of the names that you're seeing are Chinese names or they're Indian names. They may be immigrants to the United States. They may be studying in American universities, but they're not native-born Americans in many cases. And so in many ways, in order to stay competitive right now, we're going to have to find a way to spin up or import the mathematical talent, probably both, right? Because it takes years to make a mathematician in order to keep competing. What DeepSeek just told us is, hey, we've got more mathematicians than you to throw at this problem. And so if you throw constraints at us, like limiting our access to chips, then we're going to find a way to step around it and find more economical ways of doing things. And this is just the start of a cascade of changes that are working their way through global civilization right now.
I assume we will be relying on AI to help us study it farther as well. Thank you very much, Connie. We're going to hear next from Reggie Littlejohn, co-founder of our Sovereignty Coalition, which is co-sponsoring this particular webinar. We're very pleased to have her always. She is also a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China, the founder of a terrific organization, Women's Rights Without Frontiers. She has been really at the forefront of warning about threats to our sovereignty and freedoms arising from big tech, notably what she has come to call the digital gulag, brought to us by organizations like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, and some of these big tech giants, notably those working in and for the Chinese Communist Party. Reggie has had some very interesting insights into and profound concerns about artificial intelligence writ large, but also about the specific initiative that President Trump announced last week with much fanfare involving the so-called Stargate initiative. And we're very anxious to hear her thoughts on all of those. Reggie, welcome back. It's good to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so very much. So the announcement of DeepSeek followed very closely on the announcement of Stargate, and I believe that that's not a coincidence. I think it may have been a reaction to the announcement of Stargate. And so I'm going to be talking about that, but I'd like to start by saying that I and the Sovereignty Coalition want to congratulate President Trump again for withdrawing us from the World Health Organization. And the Sovereignty Coalition and I, Frank, others on this call have dedicated years of our lives to trying to get the U.S. to withdraw from the WHO. And one of my primary motives was because the World Health Organization the new amended international health regulations were going to basically institute a biotech surveillance state through surveillance and censorship, and then also digital IDs. And so just as we were still in the glow of just being so excited about the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, Stargate gets announced. And my concern is that the same thing can be achieved through Stargate in the wrong hands as what the World Health Organization would have done, which is basically installing the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system worldwide. So the Stargate announcement came with very little detail. Basically, what they said is they are going to spend $500 billion, in other words, $500 billion, to install massive data centers all over the country. And what is the rationale for this? Then we get Larry Ellison getting up there and saying, "Oh, this is going to enable us to use artificial intelligence to identify, early stage cancer in the blood." I mean, we don't need $500 billion in enormous data centers to do that. And according to a interview I watched just this morning with Dr. Robert Malone, creating individualized mRNA cancer vaccines is, quote, grossly naive, end quote. So what's the real purpose of this? What is the real purpose of these massive data centers? I would like to play now a clip of Larry Ellison in a recent interview.
Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison predicts AI surveillance will be part of our everyday lives in the future. During a recent Oracle Q&A, Ellison said AI will soon play a major role in monitoring society through a vast network of interconnected cameras, including security systems, police body cams, and vehicle dash cams.
Everyone would see it. Your body cams will be transmitting that. The police will be on their best behavior, because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
Ellison's vision is for AI to analyze data from this network of cameras in real time in an attempt to prevent crime, while also tracking and influencing public behavior for a safer society. However, the idea raises serious privacy concerns. Critics argue it could lead to a surveillance state with constant monitoring infringing on personal privacy rights, while others say it could help solve crimes faster and provide transparency to citizens in cases of excessive force from law enforcement.
We're going to have supervision. In other words, every police officer is going to be supervised at all times.
Ellison's proposal highlights a growing trend among tech giants to harness AI for societal influence, which may significantly reshape our lives in the coming years.
So why do we need these incredibly massive data centers? Is it to have a surveillance society, like Larry Ellison just said, that every, the police officers, they're going to be the ones who are going to be, kept in line? Yeah. But he also said that all of us, every person is going to be wearing a body cam, and that citizens are always going to be on their best behavior through this system of interconnected cameras. I mean, so that's what I think. I'm worried that that's what this is about. It certainly is something that we need to be very worried and cautious about, because even if President Trump would not lead us down that path, we have no control over who's going to be the next president. Some other president could say, "Oh, look at this great infrastructure that was built to do all these good things, and we're going to use it to completely entrap humanity." So I just want to say this: that through Stargate and also together with digital IDs, we run the risk of being entrapped in a digital gulag. I'd like now to show the chart of from the World Economic Forum about all the digital IDs will do, and I would say one of the things that I'm concerned about is the extent to which President Trump wants digital IDs, and he's been talking about them in terms of the border, so that would be a good use for them, But then once the infrastructure has been created, they can be used for all kinds of nefarious purposes that was not his intent, but might be the intent of other people who are in office in the future. So could we have that chart, please? Digital IDs will be required, according to the World Economic Forum, will be required to access healthcare, open bank accounts, travel, shop, pay online, participate in social media, to access government services, pay taxes, vote, and collect government benefits. For people to own and use a communications device, such as a cell phone or a computer, you're going to have a digital ID. For service providers to monitor these devices, so surveilling us, and also for the creation and monitoring of smart cities. This is what Stargate can do. Stargate can provide the digital AI infrastructure for this massive surveillance that can be used to install the China social credit to be implemented worldwide, trapping humanity in a digital gulag. And I say worldwide because between the United States and China, we're kicking off basically an AI arms race. And once we have these massive data centers and China has DeepSeek, I mean, everybody's going to be scrambling to catch up or to surpass us if they can, even for the purposes of national security, of all the national security of the various countries. So this is a recipe. I feel that we are standing on the precipice of humanity becoming absolutely enslaved in a digital gulag, and we need to step back and figure out a very careful way forward that will enable us to be able to not fall behind in important strategic AI that has to do with national defense and things like that, but at the same time will have protections in it that will not enable this kind of a biotech surveillance police state to be instituted in the United States and the world. Thank you.
A very, very grim prognosis indeed, but one that I think the facts support as at the very minimum a profound concern. We're going to open this up for some give and take between our panelists to explore a bit further the downside risks as well as potential upsides, and most especially the extent to which, as Joe indicated at the very outset, we may find ourselves compelled to engage in all of this, even with those downside risks, out of national security concerns. And Joe, maybe we could pick up on that point with you from the get-go here in the Q&A. From what you are seeing with respect to Chinese AI, Chinese big tech for that matter, the military buildup writ large, but specifically in this space, is there any question in your mind that they are moving aggressively to weaponize AI in the battlefield sense of the word, not some of the other things we've touched on here, propaganda or data aggregation, but for military purposes?
Well, Frank, it's like I say, it's a very complex web work. I would say that one can always assume that China and the CCP will marshal all the resources available to use artificial intelligence, robotics, autonomous weapons in order to gain some sort of military advantage and also economic advantage. And China is not limited by the same ethical restraints that the U.S. is limited by, even if the U.S. oftentimes will defy those ethical constraints with black projects. So in the U.S. itself, it's very, very complicated. Just to give you one example, one of the rising military companies in the U.S. is Anduril. Anduril was founded by Palmer Luckey, who is a Peter Thiel protege. Peter Thiel, of course, co-founder of Palantir, one of the most important national security AI firms in the country. And Anduril, under Palmer Luckey, is also partnering with OpenAI, which is partnered with Microsoft. And of course, Microsoft and Amazon provide cloud storage and computing for the Department of Defense, CIA, so on and so forth. And OpenAI is also partnering with the Department of Defense. So it's a very complex web where you can't necessarily point to any one element in the U.S. and say, this is the good guy or bad guy or whatever. It's really a cacophony of competition and cooperation. But just to sum up, before I do have to drop off, to sum up the answer to your question about China. China produces far more papers on AI in the academic literature. They produce a whole slew of patents. But what you have to remember about these papers and patents is the quantity is not indicative of quality. And there's every reason for the U.S. state and U.S. companies to portray China as an imminent threat because of their technical expertise. But I think there's very good reason to be skeptical of even that. China isn't ahead of the U.S. on AI, even with any advances that DeepSeek might present. And China, despite their advantages in infrastructure and manufacturing in some ways, isn't really ahead of the U.S. militarily. I'm sure many would disagree with that, but I think the U.S. by and large still has the advantage, undoubtedly, in the AI race. You don't want China to catch up. You certainly don't want Chinese apps like DeepSeek R1 or TikTok being used in America to hoover up American data in order to be used against us or to disseminate propaganda into the U.S. But just in closing, for the general public, you need to be very skeptical of the intentions and these statements coming out of China. You also, unfortunately, just kind of to echo what Reggie Littlejohn was just saying there, and also Connie Elliott, you need to be skeptical of the long-term effects of relying on U.S. technology, because it isn't always the case is not always that the user is the one getting the benefit. Very often, the users of U.S. technology are the ones being used.
Can I ask you one more question before you go, Joe? Just to calibrate again. Could you speak to the role that U.S. companies have been playing in China and the extent to which whatever our advantages might be have been compromised or potentially could be compromised as a result of that kind of cooperation?
You should know first and foremost that, for instance, Elon Musk has a gigafactory in China and has long projected that China would be the largest company for Tesla products. There's also some degree of technology transfer involved in that, although the extent of it is unknown to my knowledge. You also have massive reliance on Chinese manufacturing and other elements of their infrastructure by U.S. companies, Apple, Amazon, so on and so forth. So that gives the Chinese a lot of leverage over the U.S. tech companies, whether it's big tech or any little tech companies that are operating in partnership with China, meaning that they are limited as to how much they're actually able to overtly either condemn Chinese atrocities or Chinese abuse of power. And also, in many ways, they are going to be beholden to them. Now, under the Trump administration, it appears that a lot of that is going to be diffused. Trump is doing everything possible to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., to impose tariffs. And the general tenor is one in which the U.S., as the USA, not as a kind of global marketplace or economic zone, will reassert dominance. But again, especially in the case of Elon Musk, who, to my knowledge, has never once criticized China, you have to understand the degree of leverage that they have and the limits of any of these allies to the Trump administration, their limits as to how much they can actually be full-on America First patriots. This may change. There's a lot going on under the surface. But again, for the general public, one always has to be skeptical not only of geopolitical rivals, but of the corporations and government that we rely on ourselves. It's up to us to put pressure on them to serve us instead of using us for their own purposes. And thank you again, Frank, and
Thank you, Joe,
everyone
so
else
much.
who participated.
Appreciate your being with us, my friend. Reggie, let me turn to you because I think this ties into some of the concerns that you've eloquently expressed about the degree to which American big entities, like the participants in this Stargate exercise, are, well, not necessarily motivated by pro bono publico, as they say. They may have their own agendas, commercial most notably. Could you talk us through a little bit more whether it is in the perceived interests of these companies to be aggressively pursuing the kind of digital control, surveillance, and so on that Ari Ellison, among others, has discussed? And the devil take the hindmost in terms of the country. And if that is the case, what your view is as a prominent member of our sovereignty coalition for how we protect freedom in that kind of environment?
I was actually quite taken aback by this Stargate announcement. I mean, I just did not see that coming. I was so overjoyed at coming out from under the whole surveillance state that was about to be implemented through the World Health Organization. And I was truly dismayed to see an even worse one. I mean, the World Health Organization doesn't have $500 billion to implement this digital gulag. To be seen it implemented on U.S. soil with money that's not necessarily even coming from the United States. I mean, that's a whole nother issue is, where is this money coming from? Who are the investors? And I'm frankly scratching my head. It's like, who's gaining from this? And what do they have to gain from this? I mean, are these people are going to invest 500, or is it just a donation? We're giving $500 billion so that the United States can cure cancer with mRNA vaccines. That doesn't make sense to me. That really doesn't pass the smell test. There's got to be something behind this, and I don't know what it is. But I think that we need to really press and try to figure it out, because it doesn't make any sense. It really makes me uncomfortable. And I just wonder, what President Trump has been told. I wonder what his advisors have been saying to him, whether he really believes that this is, really just to cure cancer and we need this $500 billion infrastructure. So anyway, Frank, I'm sorry I don't have, more of a, like, this is who's behind it. This is what their real, agenda is. This is how we prevent it. This is very new. I'm taken by surprise by it. And this is something that we really need to focus on. What I'm trying to do right now is just sound the alarm. Okay, I mean, do we want to live in a society where we have massive data centers and everybody's wearing a body cam so that we're recording all of our own actions, recording everybody else's actions, the cameras are recording us to keep citizens in line, and etc.? Do we really want to have the China social credit system on U.S. soil? I would say no. And so for whatever good reasons this system might be implemented, it can be used for extremely nefarious reasons, including not only AI, but even transhumanism. Are they setting up an infrastructure that to try to somehow, I don't know what, Neuralink, linking our brains to the internet or whatever else? I mean, I don't know what they have in mind. These guys are just beyond me in the way that they think. I don't think that way. So I just really can't say what they're thinking or how we are best to combat it.
But I appreciate you sort of nutsing that out, even though we don't know the answers at the moment, because they're the kinds of questions that we ought to be asking, especially since those are the folks that are supposed to be on, as Steve Bannon likes to say, our side of the football, as opposed to, the Chinese communists, who assuredly are not. And Connie, could you just elaborate a little bit on this? I mentioned the term that caught my ear when when Joe first mentioned it, the idea that we're talking about technologies that we really don't understand, that we're pursuing them aggressively, and their potential for good, yes, but also for ill is ill-defined at best. Hallucinations being just one example of something that could be a problem, it seems to me. I mean, I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. I've been listening, I think it's National Public Radio has some commercial, they don't call them commercials, but some commercial for some product that promises that that their AI is going to be hallucination free. What are they talking about? And what are the implications if it turns out they're not hallucination free? And these guys on our side have, in fact, a Pandora's box they've very firmly pried open.
That's an interesting question to explore. So the way an LLM, a large language model, works is that it's a Bayesian system, and that means that it estimates, given the probability that something happened before, what is the probability that something else is supposed to happen next? And what they feed it is every piece of text they can get their hands on. In fact, the world, these machines are so these programs are so data hungry that they're actually about to run out of new information to give the systems to train them on. When it talks to us, it gives us this human-like response. It says, what is the most probable word that should occur next, given all the words that have occurred before now? And it says something. It doesn't understand the essential nature of a thing, its ontology. It doesn't say, oh, for example, this is the area we first ran into problems. We're talking about lawsuits that have to do with Chevron deference. And that really is a discussion of federalism and several other activities. And so I should look for certain things. No, it says, oh, you've asked me about Chevron deference. It'll give an answer and it will start citing cases, things that sound real. But when you go back to look up the cases, they don't exist. They just sound like they should exist. And one of the things that happened early on after ChatGPT's released is that overworked lawyers actually tried to use ChatGPT to write their briefs. And they got in trouble with the courts because they turned in briefs filled with cases that the chat program just imagined should exist. And yeah, and put in the brief. You also see it in the art rendering programs when they try to render hands. Hands are interesting, you know, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers. The system doesn't say, oh, the ontology of hands is that they have 5 fingers. It says it has these appendages. And so you see things being drawn with like 7 fingers, 4 fingers, 6 fingers, stuff that can look like real nightmare fuel. It's all hallucinated together because the systems don't understand the nature of things. They don't do what our brains do. They counterfeit what our brains do. They put out language that sounds like it understands, or images that seem like it might understand. It's easier to see the problem in a drawing of a person with 18 fingers than it is to see the problem in a legal brief with 14 made-up cases of citation. And that's what that's what the big money is talking about, trying to turn running our whole society over to right now. With all the data that we put out. Because remember, without, this is a discussion we have to have, without digital ID, we don't really have a way of asserting that we have digital equities. We don't have an easy way of asserting that we own our metadata and should be compensated for our metadata. So right now, big tech is basically using us as metadata farms that they train their systems on. It's sorry, we started at hallucination, but we've opened an entire Pandora's box that really comes down to how do we preserve an American system, the Republic, a system where individuals are supposed to be free of the fear of being dominated by others in an era where we are so slammed with information and its manipulation and with the harvesting of information off of us that we're not even in a position to preserve our own equities.
And again, I just want to emphasize that's assuming that the people doing the large language model training and evolution are not actually hostile. I mean, they may want more of control than is consistent with our freedoms, our constitutional rights, and so on. But at least I think it's the case that they're not out actively seeking to destroy the country. Whereas people that we're talking about in the Chinese Communist Party and the folks working under their control very definitely have that in mind. And Reggie, you have done such important work, really, I think, penetrating some of the darkest aspects of the Chinese Communist Party, its agenda, how it treats its own people, to say nothing of what it would do to us if it could get their hands on the Americans, in the form of particularly this one-child policy, whereby I think you called it the womb police, were created to monitor the status of women's, menstrual cycles and pregnancy status, if any, for the purposes of exercising absolute control over them and their families. It was a very, very powerful insight into a kind of Orwell on steroids society, and that was instituted before there was this social credit system in place, let alone the technologies that we're now talking about to enable it to be vastly more controlling, even in free societies, let alone totalitarian ones. So with all of those insights, Reggie, could you speak to this question that I think has sort of come out of Connie's comment, that we're looking at essentially running out of content, but not running out of ambitions for control that would be directed, weaponized, if you would, by a regime that seeks absolutely unmistakably the destruction of this country, as does the Chinese Communist Party.
The thing is that these digital IDs that I was mentioning before, which would be operated through these massive data centers, and even right now, the European Parliament, the European Union, in conjunction with the World Health Organization, is rolling out international interoperable digital IDs. So if these things are going to be international and interoperable, what's to stop the Chinese Communist Party from getting a hold of all of our data? And all it takes is one bad actor that's inside of the system to send stuff to China, to be a massive leak to the Chinese Communist Party. Or it might be designed, so that people who are traveling to China will be able to take their digital IDs with them, and they'll have all this international interoperable information with them when they go to China, or China can hack the system. And then we could end up being, in a China social credit system actually run by the Chinese Communist Party. To say nothing of targeting individuals like you and me and many on this call who have been highly critical of China, and just sort of through AI, they're going to know exactly, where we are, what we're doing. They can cut us off from our bank accounts. They can cut us off from our credit cards. They can cut us off from filing our taxes, from having social media accounts, from all the things I mentioned in that digital ID. That anybody who's been critical of China could end up being utterly paralyzed. Anyone who is a so-called enemy of the state, like with the Chinese Communist Party, enemies of the state, So in other words, let's say we get somebody in office that has a certain ideology, and you have social media posts that show that you are contrary to that ideology. They could make life very difficult and very miserable for you through this massive data surveillance, and through these digital IDs and all the things that you be required not only to have a digital ID, but to be in good standing in order to access basically any aspect of civilized life on Earth. So I think that this is terribly, terribly dangerous. And we're so close to implementing it right now. I really feel like we're standing on the edge of a precipice.
I have to say. And on top of all that, Reggie, the other piece of it that I think Gordon kind of touched on is the extent to which Americans may voluntarily be providing, immense quantities of this kind of data. Certainly, that's happening with TikTok right now, and what I think is envisioned here with getting people hooked up with Chinese servers for their chatbots or for their various projects or whatever other use they're going to make of artificial intelligence. You could see the Chinese being able to tap into immense amounts of information, data, weaponizable information that can be obtained without having to trouble themselves to hack it or to otherwise purloin it. It's just being surrendered. And this is, I guess, one of the things that I come to a question that our audience has asked. What can be done to make sure that President Trump is, in fact, acquainted with this kind of information? He's got people around him like Elon Musk. He's obviously been hanging with Larry Ellison and the Sam Altmans and so on. What is a recommendation here for either of you in terms of trying to make sure that caution is insinuated into the system as opposed to just this sort of go attitude towards AI? Reggie, want to start with you?
I think that this webinar is a good first step. I think that people sharing this webinar widely would be a good first step. I think that we can have a petition of citizens concerned about Stargate or Stop Stargate or Stargate, the gate to hell, or whatever we want to call it. We can have an Align Act. An Align Act is a way that you can send emails to members of Congress to alert them. I think that most people, including members of Congress, are probably not even thinking about this. They're probably thinking about, oh man, we really need to win, the fight for AI dominance. And so this is a good start or whatever. They're not thinking about how this could be used to permanently trap the human race. So we need to raise that issue with them. That's how I see doing it. Petition, Align Act, people calling their representatives, sharing this video. That would be a good start.
Thank you. What would you say, Connie, are things we might do in addition to those?
Public action is important. I think that also Congress needs to get briefed. This technology is really cutting edge, and we're seeing an example of acceleration toward the singularity. The ground is shifting under us so quickly that we barely have a chance to wrap our hands around it and understand the issue before everything we just learned becomes almost obsolete.
Would you just say a word about the singularity, please? Because that was another question that was posed in the chat.
Yes. So the singularity was a term developed by Ray Kurzweil, who invented the synthesizer. And one of the things he did with his money is he started his own mini think tank to make projections into the future. And there was a point when all their future projection models collapsed. They hit a singularity. Another way to say it is a catastrophe. They could see everything up to that point, and they couldn't see anything after that point. And the defining characteristic of the singularity is, yes, a big bang of humanity. And the defining characteristic of the singularity is the moment at which we either develop artificial general intelligence or we begin engineering our own intelligence, either through modification of the genome or through a neural link to an AGI or something like that. We just don't know. We have no understanding in using statistical tools of what will come next. We have to go back to more ancient tools like narrative in order to get some idea of how are we going to live through the moment? Will we live through the moment? It's an actual question.
From my limited understanding of the singularity, one aspect of it was this idea that transhumanist features of AI would be integrated with humankind in such a way as to bring about, post Homo sapien, I guess. Is that a part of this agenda, or is that perhaps a byproduct of it?
It's something the technology makes possible. A lot of Silicon Valley views death as a waste. Everything that we learn, our personality, everything we understand, it hits a stop state in that moment of death. And we're back to a very ancient quest, how to defeat or to death or to prolong life or something. And can we use our tools? Can we use our understanding of the physical sciences in order to prolong our consciousness or to create clones of our consciousness and memory so that they're not lost to the world? I think Jim Mattis was right. There are very few new original thoughts.
This raises a question as to whether artificial intelligence will come up with some original new thoughts that surpass humankind's understanding. And I was struggling with the term for this, but I remember hearing the Japanese investor in Stargate talking at the press event that the president had with them in unveiling the thing, that not only are we very rapidly going to have artificial general intelligence, which I guess is basically defined as, beyond human understanding, something that machines have taught themselves that we don't necessarily comprehend or can unravel their futures. But then he said, quite gleefully, that we're actually going to be achieving artificial super intelligence quite quickly as well, and that really seems completely beyond the pale in terms of understanding what we're doing, for one thing, and managing what we're doing as it might bear on control, as Reggie's talked about, on perhaps the triumph of hostile powers like the Chinese Communist Party, as each of you have addressed in your respective comments. But I think this is a point at which we will probably be best advised to conclude this particular brief and look forward to further insights and work on it. I think, Reggie, some of your thoughts about not only raising the alarm, but also trying to equip people to express in a way that's politically salient with our elected representatives real concerns about what's afoot here. Not least the extent to which we are witnessing the weaponization of all of this by an enemy that seeks our destruction. And they make no mistake about it, the Chinese Communist Party. So I want to just say thank you to Joe Allen. Thank you, of course, to Reggie Littlejohn, Connie Elliott, and Gordon Chang for contributions to this particular program. It is discomforting, to say the least, especially to like people like myself. I'm sure that there's so many unanswered questions here, and it seems as though we're rushing headlong into making things present realities whose full implications we certainly don't understand. So I hope that you all will keep coming back for more as we learn more about this and other aspects of the unrestricted warfare that the Chinese Communist Party is waging against us, and how each of us can make a difference. And let me just close by saying, I hope in the meantime that you will join me and I think our team in prayer that the God that has made all of us is actually in charge here, and not artificial gods that seem to be the object for at least some of these adversaries, foreign and domestic. Yeah, God bless you all. Dee, back to you.
Thanks, Frank. And thanks to all of you for being here. A video of this webinar will be posted to at presentdangerchina.org within a day of the conclusion of our program. Please share this and our other programs with your elected representatives, colleagues, and other networks. And subscribe to our Substack at presentdangerchina.substack.com and on X at CPD China. We put our updates in here, so this is a good place for you to connect with the Committee on the Present Danger China. We're also sovereignty at substack.com at Sov Coalition on X. Join us again next week for another installment of our Committee on the Present Danger China webinar series on the CCP's unrestricted warfare against America and the free world, and how CCP captured elites betray the USA. See you again. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye.